Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
Now, here's your host, Ed Cohen.
This is Ed Cohen in San Diego, and today is Friday, March 4, 10 a.m. And we're here to continue the series of discussions about geopolitics and the intersection of geopolitics today and trade and the great hire binge that's going on right now, and the sickness of what's going on in Ukraine. So let's welcome our leader, David Edick Jr. Thank you very much for doing this again.
Hey, thank you for the invitation.
Okay, here we have Gary Senga, who's par excellence executive search guy, Marianne Rechek in San Francisco, Rob Pienka, who's going to teach us how to be agile, and Mark Colo, who's our conscience. Hi, Mark.
So, great.
That's just,
high here.
Yeah. So when the others join us, we'll embarrass them too. So, okay, Dave Edick, go to you.
Well, good morning, Ed. Thank you for the invitation to be on the program here this morning. Basically, we're at a hinge in history. We are swinging from one era, which has ended, to a new one, and we'll be trying to figure out exactly what that all entails. But there's no going back. This is as big as the ending of the Cold War and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and before that, the Second World War. This is something that I didn't expect to happen. Feared it for a long time. It turns out that it was less about, I think certainly in the latter years, less about security from the Russian perspective than it was about the delusionary aspects of revanchism, of trying to go back in time, even before the end of the Russian Empire, before the Soviet Union, when Ukraine and Russia were part of the same space. That's to attempt to go backwards is nuts, really. It's madness, and it can't happen. So, but an attempt is being made, and by and large, what's coming is essentially the destruction of Ukraine in a lot of ways.
Let me ask you a question to take this to another level, perhaps. So after watching, as I was mentioning earlier, been watching CNN because I think that's the best coverage right now anyway. And midday, around 10:30, 11:30 our time, California, I was watching the drone photos following the destruction of the apartment buildings, and I was wondering, were there people inside? And if there were, what's the point of him doing that? And if there weren't people in it, well, we certainly get the message. But and then 10:30 at night, my time, we were watching bullets flying around the nuclear plant, the largest nuclear plant in Europe. And what were the generals in NATO thinking? What was President Biden thinking by not protecting that in advance? And now it's too late. So, yeah, it's enough to keep me up at night. And I usually just say my prayers after a glass of vodka and I sleep the rest of the night. But it's been getting really difficult for me. Dave Edick, what you have just said and what I have just said, are they on the same path, or do we have to employ what we did to that guy Soleimani?
That's not an option. for the United States, the security of our land and our people comes first. There will be a lot of things that are said, but ultimately it will come down to that. The United States and NATO is not going to get into this war in Ukraine unless something very badly goes awry. And a lot of effort has gone into communications and actions, certainly on the US side, but also on the Russian side, to make sure that there's no confliction of forces. So that's not going to happen. I think people need to understand that there's almost certainly not going to be a coup in Russia. That this is real war, and it's going to get ugly. As if it isn't ugly now, it's going to get a lot uglier. I think we're looking at somewhere 5 to 7 million refugees coming out of Ukraine over the next month. Yeah, there were people in those apartment buildings. I'm in direct communication with a friend in Kharkiv, and it's pretty scary. And as far as the nuclear plant is concerned, all those facilities are known certainly by the Ukrainians and by the Russians. Nobody was shooting at the reactors, but stuff can happen. There wasn't anything that anybody else could do. I mean, this is part of why I really thought that there would be a deal. I mean, you know, principles are great, and this is war, and, you know, good luck with the principles right now. This is nightmare stuff. It's really catastrophic, and it's going to end up here through an economic shock of really extraordinary proportions on top of all the pandemic turbulence that has kind of set the stage for a real challenging few years.
Rob Pienko, let's get some agility in here.
I'm always tempted to, join in the blow for blow of the current events. But from the global agility point of view, what you want to look at is everywhere on the planet where the social fabric isn't strong and power is able to escape control of the normal interests of people. And, it's kind of like there are a lot of places on the planet where that is what you can say is the reality of it. When the power escapes like this, particularly given that power seems to attract people of sociopathic tendencies who don't experience the pain of children, right? And play a big game of risk with other people's lives, and can set you back for entire generations. I remember I was sitting in my office in Iraq when Saddam was captured from his spider hole, and I was next to a gentleman, an interpreter who was, my age, a little older. He was older than I was, and he was like shaking his head while everybody else was happy. And I asked him why, and it's because my life's over. He wasted it. And that's what we're looking at here. I mean, whether it's Wall Street sending the world into a global recession, or COVID coming along, or a madman president pushing the edge of Third World War, we're all going to pay with decades and decades of setback in our private, personal lives and in our lives with each other. And it's just so sad. But you gotta if everybody dug in their heels, everybody, right, and just your heels, just the two ones you were born with, right, and we tried to keep control of the power that's around us, we'd all be a hell of a lot better off. I mean, it's work. You can't be going on vacation while it's happening, but the price of letting power run awry, this is it. It's huge.
Dave Levine, welcome. Let's get some personal opinion here. No, more personal opinion is what we need.
More personal.
Pleasure to join you folks this afternoon. My tendency is to just work. And in the face of stress, the stress goes up, I work more. And healthy or not, that's what I've done in the face of this crisis. And we've renewed our ties with our Ukrainian-based counselors, and they're available, but it's hour to hour, if not, day to day, but if not hour to hour, their availability, depending on where that next flurry of bombs hits. They're based in Kiev. They have shifted through the pandemic to telehealth delivery of training and counseling services, but and as of today, they're still available. But it's today people aren't seeking counseling and for their anxiety. They're on the hierarchy of needs. It's of course lower on the list. It's survival needs that are going on today. That take priority, whether you're a family member that's evacuating or helping others evacuate, or you're trying to find arms to defend yourself. That's the emphasis today. And hopefully sooner than later, people will get to the counseling, because when they are able to get to that, it means the security and safety issues have decreased. And we don't see those decreasing for the immediate future, unfortunately. But for those panicked and want a third party to talk that through, we're available. But there's again, day to day, hour to hour, and we don't expect those requests to be coming in. More so, it's the multinationals lining up and being reassured that there are services available for their people, but their local folks in Ukraine aren't wanting those services right now. It's again on that hierarchy of needs. It's down on the list.
Let's go to Gary Sanger, executive search at the top level. Gary, how does all this BS impacting executive search going on?
I think that's a question geographically focused. I was thinking about some of the current activity that we have, and we operate here out of Los Angeles. We operate regionally. We operate throughout the Americas and even globally on transfers. I don't know that this has a direct impact, except here we are with pre-COVID levels of demand, and there's still smaller supply of great candidates for the senior levels and for the executive levels. We are still operating with companies, as a meeting I'm having today here at lunch, down being stuck in the beautiful area of Manhattan Beach, listening to the waves bang up against nearby on this restaurant with a client, an aerospace and development client that's global. And we're having a succession planning discussion with them as it relates to some of their needs throughout their half a dozen businesses. On the other hand, I have a past client that's laying off people because of a direct relationship to the chip world. They can't get them for their drone products. On the other hand, I have a printed circuit board, a PCB roll up, where in fact they have 3 to 4 companies they've rolled up. They've enlisted us to go find a CEO. They want that CEO to make it work. And they've got $10 million worth of machinery that they need somebody to operate in this area where they've got a new lease on the technology to make it better. So overall, I suspect there's some specific impacts. I'm in an IRC Global Executive Search Alliance where we have 45 countries and 90 cities, IRC Global Search Partners. And one of my partners in Finland, they've got 700 plus miles of common border with Russia. On the other hand, my colleagues out of the Ukraine, it's all over the place. Frankly, a lot of this makes it seem a little bit incidental in terms of our day-to-day things, where we have the loss of life. going on with the dastardly folks from Russia invading and taking over and killing our friends in the Ukraine.
Welcome, Barbara Bolt. Thank you for coming again. I know you're busy today. So we just started and we're just reviewing current events as they're impacting business. Barbara is a communications expert and has lived in many places in Europe, I guess, mainly, right?
Yeah.
So we'll get back to you in just a second. Marianne, what do you think about the discussion so far?
Very enlightening as usual. I have a standing Friday appointment with, there's an immigration attorney based in Brooklyn, New York, who was born in the Ukraine. And he came to the United States when he was, I think, 2 or 3 years old. And he runs this thing called GMI Rocket, where he brings in
Roman.
Yes, Roman Zalichenko brings in people in the immigration tech space. So I'm interested to hear his take on that.
How old is he?
How old is he? I don't know, actually, maybe.
I think he's in his 30s.
Yeah, I was going to say late 30s, mid to late
Yeah.
30s.
Yeah, I had him speak at our meeting at JP Morgan Chase, Park Avenue about 3 years ago.
Oh,
And that was like his first live event ever that he spoke.
Cool.
He said, and he had, yeah, back then he had the hair and the bun and all that.
oh, he's still got the hair in the bun.
Yeah, right. But a really bright kid, I'll tell you that.
Oh, super smart. And
Yeah.
he's putting on an immigration tech conference at the end of this month. But the other thing, I don't know why, but I am forever hopeful because of my involvement with this State Department program called Tech Women. And these women are here now in San Francisco, working in various tech companies, some virtually, some in person, depending on each company. But the amount of drive and enthusiasm and energy that these women bring to improving life around the world is truly phenomenal. So I can't help but think something is going to come out of this in a good way, not for the Ukrainian people, of course, but I don't know what the solution is. I really don't know what the answer is.
One of the things I saw last night on TV during the day, I think it was Anderson Cooper who's really got his grip on all this, focused on images from the train station inside Poland, welcoming refugees coming off the train. And there are all these people standing around with signs saying, "We have free space in our house."
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that was like, whoa. And it was just so warming and so beautiful. David, what do you think of that? I mean, I know you think it's great, but go a little deeper about how it relates to the people in the region, not just the Ukrainians, but the Polish, the Moldavs, even Romania. That's a really tough neighborhood now. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts in the neighborhood, and in living memory, even for the older people, but in living memory of those cultures, they remember the Second World War. They remember the
Nazis, and then the Russians. Right.
But they also remember the mass ethnic cleansing that took place afterwards, 1946. Millions and millions of people were moved forcibly, as peaceable ethnic cleansing took place, as these new nations either were revived or kind of reborn or born in a lot of ways. Look, so these are the early days. There is an affinity right now for those that have experienced being on the wrong side of power, projection, if you will. The numbers are going to be enormous. Right now, it's maybe 500,000 Ukrainians have gone to Poland as refugees. Post 1914, probably close to 1 million Ukrainians got work permits in Poland. A lot of Ukrainians left to do that, came home for the pandemic. There's going to come a point, though, in a not too distant future, where the total amount of refugees is going to become overwhelming. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. There's a couple of things that are coming out of this really, really big. One is that Germany has changed direction in how it deals with strategic security, military security. This is the Germans have put up $100 billion fund this year to fund a build out of the military, but this is all going to come within the EU. And this is going to present a complication for the US. There's going to be a fundamental de-Russification of energy consumption in Europe. So in terms of, for example, HR, energy worldwide, there's going to be a lot of money going into that, and it's going to have to go into areas beyond renewables. Aerospace, yeah, in Europe in particular, in the long run, in my view, the United States has lost ground by what's taken place in Europe. It'll take a while for that to become fully apparent. But big changes in Germany and within the EU.
What we're seeing is the EU is getting its own backbone, and with Germany in the lead.
Yes.
Now, we're assuming that's going to be peaceful, but it's probably a good thing from this perch right here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll read something that was trending on German Twitter yesterday. As a German, I just want to get some things straight. The entire Western world wants us to build up a huge army, march through Poland, fight the Russians if needed. Just writing it down so there's no misunderstanding in the future. So, huge changes going on, and none of it's really thought through. It's just happening. And it's fascinating times, this won't be simple. Inside Russia, this is a disaster. There's an entire generation of people that have spent their lives building anew in a time of hope. Very much what Marianne was speaking about, tech savvy, internationally minded. The work of their lifetime and very much the work of my lifetime is over, and they're going to ground.
So let's just talk about maybes here. And I'd like to pull back in Gary into this. Everybody's welcome to talk, but Gary, you got a real grip on top level thinking in companies. So Poland has blossomed into a back office for Fortune 1000 company, global FT 1000 companies. And now I don't know how many troops, US troops, have moved over from Germany into Poland, but it's a lot. And it's become Fortress NATO, Fortress America, actually, but in Poland, under the NATO wing. I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say here. But this talent level, executive talent level in Poland, Gary Singer, is apparently coming front and center now. And because they speak English perfectly, they're very, very techy. And Rob Pienka, maybe you will have some insight on this also.
Yeah, it's hard for me to not look at it from a humanitarian assistance perspective, because I worked in ethnic cleansing areas, Bosnia and Serbia and Iraq and Lebanon and Syria. And the thing that has struck me is all the period, and I think David will agree with this, all the period up to the actual military invasion, the question on everybody's mind is, are they going to invade? Where if you look at the Russian military doctrine, they were already doing things that they classify as warfare before they did the kinetic warfare. So we were already, the invasion was already started, right? And if you look at it now, are they doing things that we don't considered to be warfare. I mean, this is global agility. You're trying to understand the concept, the cultural concepts of warfare. When you get two different cultural concepts of warfare that meet together, right? You have certain blind sides or blind spots with what you're looking at. And if you look at Syria, half the population of Syria goes across the border. We call it a refugee crisis. Assad calls it purging a population he doesn't want, and good riddance, and don't send them back and they're yours. Right. So we do have people that are inclined and use the strategy of actually taking millions and millions of people and throwing them over to somebody else to get them out of their area. And so could you have a semi-depopulated Ukraine as what Putin considers to be a stable end game to this, while we're running around worrying about refugees? I mean, they're going to be there forever. What are they going back? How are they going back? I mean, at least the men are going back with guns. That kind of answers that, because that didn't happen in Syria. But it's, Putin is fighting I don't know, Dave, would you call it dirty warfare compared to our look at it?
It's total war, we've kind of forgotten about what it's really all about. We've gotten kind of anodyne and, limited, but yeah, ethnic cleansing is war by other means, and we're doing some economic stuff of our own. But yeah, this is about moving people out. Pretty clear to me, and the corridors, the humanitarian corridors, are less about it bringing in food and medicine. It's about letting people out, moving people out. Yeah, this is very much part of the plan.
So, David, would I be correct in saying that Putin has first base and second base in mind, but he's looking at third base and home, using that analysis, but about dividing and conquer, which he's always had. Dividing Europe and, putting the Iron Curtain up.
So one of the things that was really apparent in the last couple of years was a Russian withdrawal from Europe, and very much in the last year, the Kremlin basically said, "We don't care anymore. Bye." So this is a resurrection of the of an Iron Curtain. Quite frankly, the West is going to do most of the raising of the iron. This operation, this war, will do much of the work that the Kremlin is looking to do in terms of altering the space in Ukraine. They will just get something that they didn't expect, they didn't understand. Yeah, this war never works out as planned, and there are loads of surprises for the Russians. There were delusions carried into this that there wouldn't be large-scale resistance, and even ultimately that with millions of people moving out, there's going to be a low-level, significant resistance. I've warned people through my network there that Iraq was a learning lesson for the U.S. military, and Ukraine would be a learning lesson for the Russian military as well. They didn't take that to heart. But
Gary Singer.
Yeah.
So U.S. companies, let's just focus about U.S. companies. So the search for executive talent, is it focused on who can get the job done, or our company or our boards? Assuming it's a board decision to have you take the lead here in your search and your counsel on succession planning.
Ed, thank you. Sorry, I lost connection there for a moment. The boards, the ownership, the executives, most of the time they are very clear on what it is they have as their company in terms of a culture. And so many of them are very, very aware of what they have, and they either want to enhance it or grow it or change it. by the hiring of an executive from the outside. Number two, what's it going to take to go find that person and be interested? In the US, the A, B, C, and D level cost of living cities make it really challenging. We're just completing a deal now where the executive is moving from Michigan into Arizona. And in this instance, when you have the 90, 100, 110 degree temperature difference, I can be very, very flagrant about the temperature difference, and warmer is better. So the comp packages it takes, we have a PCB board roll up. They have 3 or 4 companies they put together. They are a very wealthy investor that wants growth out of this, and they think they have the secret sauce for what they're going to do in the PCB world, which is huge. And they've got $10 million worth of machinery waiting to be used, and have an executive need from us to go take this into the next generation. So as an example, equity, big numbers, and we've only had the search for 30, 40 days, and we already have it down to the final 2. And that last discussion with the one that's chosen is happening next Monday, Tuesday. And I'm sure a deal will be made because the timing is now and yesterday. And so the boards are reacting and acting very, very aggressively. Those are examples, whether it's in the aerospace and defense area, whether it's in the industrial area. Supply is small, demand is big, and there's a lot of money out there driving it.
What is PCB?
Printed circuit board manufacturing. So that's mostly everywhere.
Yeah, well, I happen to know in Arizona, they have benefited recently from huge multi-billion-dollar investments by Intel and by the Taiwan Semiconductor Group, getting ready for a major shift out of Taipei and to start making chips in Chandler, Arizona, next door to Intel's semiconductor plants. That is like becoming ground zero for US onshoring. David, back to you.
Just one quick comment, Ed, if I could. And then the residual of the rapid growth in Arizona, and our target is Tucson, and then the absence of homes for our executives to find, literally 0.2% inventory. I'm making that number up. So to find a home with this couple and family can move from Michigan to Tucson, that's brutal in terms of they're now trying to find that.
Yeah. So those areas where somebody like that will live, at least long term, will be in the foothills, just to the north of downtown Tucson.
That's correct.
Happen to know that area right near that ranch, that cowboy ranch on the east end there. That's ground zero for multi-million and up. Yeah, anyway, enough of that.
Correct. Yeah. Tango Verde Ranch. I know it well.
Oh, right. That's it. I couldn't think of the name.
How about Airbnb in a granny flat? Let's cut to the chase here. Time is money.
Yeah. Barbara Bull, what do you think of all this?
Well, I think, as someone has already said, that I think David said it, that it's all up for grabs at this point. None of us in our lifetimes have seen military action like this, someone taking this kind of step. I often think about, the Jews in the 30s and 40s in Europe had normal lives until their lives were totally upended. And it happened almost overnight. All of a sudden, they no longer had a home. They had to wear a gold star. They were it's crazy to think these Ukrainian people who are dying by the droves, they're like you and I. They have modern lives. This isn't some caveman civilization that you can just wipe out. And I find it scares me so much. I don't even know if scared is the right word, but I just keep thinking about this. These people's lives have been disrupted in a way that none of us can even imagine. I heard this morning that 15,000 Ukrainians in Kyiv are sleeping in the subway. What would you do? What would you do if overnight, all of a sudden, you had to give up all your creature comforts? And, nonostante is Italian, but not to even mention people who live in $1 million mansions. I don't know how they live, so I can't even imagine that either. But I'm using my juicer in the morning. I'm going about my daily life. These people can't do that anymore, and that it's morally, what this man has done is morally reprehensible. That's what I think about it. I'm just like, oh my God, who? It's somebody just already said also, I don't have words. That's sort of the way I'm feeling right now. It's and I have a client right in Geneva who's an oil and gas trader. He canceled 2 appointments this week. He can't do his coaching because his world is upended business wise, but it's the human cost of this. And as somebody already said, wars aren't predictable. You don't know what's going to happen. I do believe that Putin has made a really bad move and he's going to live to regret it. However, a whole lot of other people are not going to live to regret it. They're just going to die. And it's just shocking that in 2022, with the communication we have, with the technology that we have, that this kind of ground war can still happen. And we've perpetrated them as well. I mean, I'm totally aware of that. But Kyiv's a modern city, and these people have modern lives, and they're professionals, and it's sickening. It's honestly sickening.
Before we get closer to the end here, I, like you, I'm intrigued by this conversation, would like it to go on, but we all have other things to do. So use the chat down below and exchange emails or websites. And the ROI of this meeting is the contacts for future use for you individually. I have nothing to do with all that. Just bringing people together, and that's really important. Paulette, if you'd like to introduce yourself using the chat, that would be cool. We have a guest who does not want to be on camera for whatever reason, but I welcome you, Paulette, to communicate in the chat. Good morning. All right, Dave Edick, let's do this again. And if you want to do it in a week, that's fine with me. But if you want to take longer and see what happens, we'll try to grow it and get some additional people involved.
Hi, this is Ed, and I thank you for tuning in to Global TV Talk Show, a unit on globalbusinessnews.net. We broadcast to the world, as you know by now. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that our programs are advertising supported. We're grateful for co-sponsors, advertisers. They have a marketing budget coupled with a strong desire to be associated with our top quality program. And of course, I'm grateful. Well, here's our advertisers, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes or so, and we'll proceed with this interesting conversation. Thank you.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by Porchlight Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com. Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture To Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
We are pleased to welcome Adamo Education as a proud sponsor of Global TV Talk Show.
The concept of a microschool is the reimagining of the one-room schoolhouse. My name is Tamara Becker. I'm the president and CEO of Adamo Education. The microschool concept really does not just lend itself to the personalization and the customization of learning, but also the social development and fostering that sense of love for learning. Unlike what we see in traditional brick and mortar schools, we have multiple grade levels in the same learning space. Students can be enriched by the socialization that they get, as well as the academic support from peers. What differentiates Adamo is the fact that we are taking the best pieces of brick and mortar, of digital, and then at-home learning. Students here can come 5 days a week. They can come 4 hours a day. It will really just depend on what is best for the student and for the parent. To enroll, just reach out via phone, text, or email, and we'll have that personalized conversation, and we'll be able to get you all set. Check us out at adamoeducation.org.
Dave Levine, do you want to talk a little bit, just a bit, please, about your connections yesterday, the day before in Ukraine?
Sure. In prior years, we served Ukraine through Russia, through Ukrainian speaker. A lot of people in Ukraine speak Russian, and there are Ukrainian speakers in Moscow and the partner we use there. But obviously in a situation like that, like today, that's not appropriate. And so we had to scramble and identify a new partner and credential a new partner. Again, those services aren't prioritized yet, but the partner we ended up with has experience with suicide prevention, particularly with veteran populations, Ukrainian vets, having not a dissimilar issue that returning American vets from Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, suicide is way up, and they got a similar problem in the Ukraine. So that's the experience that these folks brought, which is, I think, unique experience for a clinical psychology, social work oriented firm. It's so we've got that in place, but again, that's not the priority today. I mean, in one of the phone calls, I literally heard bombs in the background going off. Like Barbara pointed out, we can hardly imagine living through that environment. It's tough to see it on CNN. And we can empathize and donate and utilize what services we have. Gary sounds like he's pretty darn active and continuing his services. And although I'm not active yet, the infrastructure is now in place to serve folks when they can. I've been consulting with a group called Wellness Checkpoint the last 2-3 years, and I've been working with them for 10 years, but they were founded by Zoriana Hywaran, a Ukrainian immigrant, very talented. They were bought by Carebook, another Canada-based wellness firm, and she retired with that acquisition. But she's never been busier with all of her contacts back in Ukraine. She had an apartment in Western Ukraine that she's now given up to strangers, but folks that really need a couple families that needed a safer place than Kyiv to reside for now. She's helping other folks get into Poland and transport from Poland to other safe places where they can live for the time being. But it's been a privilege watching this woman operate and doing what she can with all her ties back in Ukraine. We'll see. Day to day, we just don't know. I think we need to leverage our skills in our businesses to the extent we can make a small difference. And I'd follow Ed's advice: have a glass of vodka and pray and try to get some sleep.
But my vodka comes from Trader Joe's, not from Russia. So,
Well, I think Rob also made a really good point, is like, will these people go home? That what will there be to go back to? And do they want to live in the Ukraine that will come out of this situation? Frankly, I think there are a lot of highly qualified Ukrainians who will end up in different places and be part of the global economy. There'll be great talent on offer in some ways, which is sort of a weird thing to think about at this point, why that talent will be available. But in my experience, Ukrainians are highly qualified. Obviously, it's a generalization, but they're educated and they make great employees, I think, in a lot of cases. So that's another interesting outcome.
And Barbara, can I add to that, since you brought me in? One of the undertow of an ethnic cleansing is the movement of people towards homogenous zones, right? And even if you don't like Milosevic, but you're Serbian, you go to the Serbian areas because you're safe. Mm-hmm. So you end up with the consolidation of people in these types of conflicts. And I think the vision we could all kind of look at to see what we think about it is, China's already behind a kind of bamboo wall where the relationship is problematic and it's not gung-ho anymore of getting involved with each other, right? The Iron Curtain that Putin could put down could be so deep and so high that there will be no trade. We lived with that, for decades and decades. They used to call it the prison of nations. So on the other side of the wall, it's just all, locked down, which means that the free world, the West, Western Europe, all kinds of other second economies, the United States, Canada, Australia, all of that could rededicate itself to the community that they represent. And I'm talking trade community. They already have all the free trade aspects. We already share all the technologies. It could be, we will no longer be distracted by these neighborhoods that we don't really get to go into anymore, but we could focus on ourselves. And it might not be a bad thing. And you said if you had, Ukrainian educated labor and management to that, well, more resources, the better.
That's an interesting perspective.
He's pulling out of the world. We're not.
Rob, you make me think of the idea of that person with the sign as the train's coming into some city in Poland, and free space in my home for the refugees coming in from Ukraine. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking in the Americas, we right here, why couldn't we have an effort that might help with some of that as well? We are all spoiled. We have more than we need, and most of us are well fed. The situation in terms of what we might do to help some of these folks that have been bombed out, lost their parents, lost their homes, need something new. That's really striking to me, that sign from somebody in Poland said, look, my house, free space, I've got room. That really is striking to me.
One of the immigration law firms in the U.S., and when you speak to Roman today, ask him about that, about opening up a special category of emergency welcome in the U.S. for Ukrainians.
They already did that, Ed. There's something, it's for the Ukrainians that are coming and are here. They get something called temporary protected status for 18 months, which allows them to live and work safely in the United States.
Now, is that relevant to what they did for the Afghans that have been stationed or hidden away in the army cases, in the army camps?
There's a little bit of a different distinction with the Afghans, and I'm not exactly sure what that is. Because a lot of the Afghans have previous U.S. government experience or U.S. government affiliated relations for people for whom they've worked as contractors.
Yeah, right. So, David, I want to just say that my early show today at 9 a.m. California time was with Angie Weinberger, who's an internationally known relocation expert in Zurich. And she and I were talking about this very thing, about resettlement, and more so, as we come to a close here, people involved in the relocation management business, particularly destination services providers, it's where the rubber meets the road and getting people acclimated and settled. They are crisis managers. But now, according to the conversation that Angie and I just had an hour ago, they're being called on. In fact, she didn't even want to talk about it in too much detail today, about giving advice to European destination services counselors about step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. This is what you must do immediately.
Look, this is a tsunami that's in progress here. We're just getting rolling on this, and I'm picking that word very carefully, tsunami. So Rob Pianka's experience in the Balkans is priceless in a situation like this. Dave Levine is well. I mean, this will be off the scale for everyone. So there, look, you know, for everybody, including people I know in Russia, people are kind of going, you know, pulling onto what can I do for what can I control in my life? And one of the takeaways from this meeting today, and I want to run off of something that Gary Sanger pointed out, the imbalance between supply and demand. And it's one of the side effects here of this pandemic, and we've got ourselves a big inflation problem, and that it's several years going to have to work through. We have a supply shock coming into the global economy that will exceed in many ways what has occurred with the pandemic, and it will be on top of the pandemic. We will have supercharged inflation worldwide. So in terms of what companies do, they need to think about what inflation means to them. Ultimately, even in Europe and in the United States, central banks are going to have to come to terms with, do we fight inflation or do we deal with the consequences of a war? Okay, inflation is one of the historic consequences of war. So what will affect us here? Inflation. You know, start thinking in terms of, you know, what gas, another topic for another day, but we'll see it here.
Yeah. Thank heavens we aren't driving as much as we were before the pandemic. That might be one.
Some of us, I mean, yeah, I mean, the gas demand is well above pre-pandemic levels because people aren't taking public transportation.
That's probably true in major areas, yeah.
But what has taken place here, this is full-scale war in a big country. 42, 44 million people, depending on how you want to count about it. Think in terms of 5 to 7 million refugees in a month. They're supposed to start planting in Ukraine in a month. It's one of the biggest agricultural suppliers in the world. How to handle the feeding and housing, let alone the future of 5 to 7 million people is going to stretch the capacity of much of European society, let alone ours. You know, and I'm working with people in Kurdistan who had worked with U.S. military as translators, and for them, these refugee programs are measured in years and years and years. I had people contacting me in panic. You know, they have people at the door, and things will be different for the Ukrainians. This will be fast tracked. The fellow that you know in New York, the young Ukrainian guy, he's going to have more to do. How he's going to sleep, I don't know. There's
David,
hope there.
Before you sign off, would you mind turning your head and showing us your man bun? So just so we don't finish the kind of man bun Marianne was talking about at the colleague in Brooklyn.
I'm missing this.
Roman wears his on his head. It's up here.
Okay.
David's just right in the back, so it's disguised during these conference calls.
I don't believe it. Wait a minute. It's sort of like Mark Colo has one, right?
It's waving goodbye.
I know. All right, this is great, people. Thank you very much for being on the show again. Please come
Thank you
back.
for having us. Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks, bye.
Bye, everybody.
Peace.
Thank you.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day and stay safe.